All candidates, now let's move along to our first topic, and that topic is poverty. And it will be introduced on the screen behind us, where we'll get our first question. So, roll the tape, please.
I'm Louise Coutu, and I'm the Executive Director of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul for the Toronto Central Council. Every year, our 1,300 volunteers make 65,000 home visits to the people trying to make ends meet. We offer them fellowship and emergency financial assistance. We also house more than 250 people at any given time. We're here at Mary's Home, one of our many shelters in the Greater Toronto Area. For our clients in need, housing affordability is one of their greatest stresses. A recent report found that someone renting an average one-bedroom apartment in Toronto must earn more than $57,000 per year to pay for their housing and other financial needs. And the study found that life isn't much cheaper in the suburbs. Safe, clean, affordable housing is key to human dignity. But these prices are out of reach for many people. We saw this when the 2016 Canadian census showed 22,000 people living in Canada's shelters. How would your party provide a preferential option for those experiencing poverty, particularly in regards to affordable housing?
Thank you, Louise. Now again, our speaking order for each topic was selected through lots drawn before the debate. And you'll each have 1 minute to respond before we have open discussion candidates. So first, Garnet, let's start with you from the Conservative Party.
Well, thank you. Sometimes Catholics feel like they have to choose between their concern for poverty and their concern for life, family, and freedom. But I believe that we must be unhyphenated Catholics, fully engaged with questions of poverty and life and family and freedom. Conservatives do not believe that the solution to every problem is a government program. Indeed, many government programs are most used by the well-connected, paid for through a tax burden that falls heavily on those who are already struggling. We have proposed tax relief targeted specifically to Canadians in need. Every personal income tax reduction ever made by a Conservative Party of Canada government was particularly targeted to low-income and middle-class Canadians. Now, on housing, we have made significant investments in Housing First homelessness programs. We will review the mortgage stress test, which has been imposed by the Liberals and put housing out of reach for many Canadians. We will bring in 30-year mortgages for first-time home buyers. Our approach respects subsidiarity, so we have increased and guaranteed support to provinces and local governments while always respecting their competence and jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Garnet. Now, Matthew Green from the NDP. Matthew.
As a former city councillor, the most haunting call I would get would be from somebody facing imminent eviction. It would haunt me because I know that I would call the shelters and I wouldn't be able to find them a place to sleep. I would take that home with me. And it would haunt me to emote because I knew that tomorrow I would probably get another call. Which is why, as a New Democrat, I am so very proud of providing this country a national housing strategy that includes the construction of 500,000 units over 10 years. The average income in my riding is $47,000. So we know that we have to be able to provide people with immediate supports, which is why we are proposing providing a $5,000 rent subsidy that will allow them to be able to be finding immediate places to live. We will also make life affordable for families by providing affordable housing and lowering the household bills on hydro and home energy retrofits. Oh, I see that red sign coming up. It comes quick.
Time does fly. Dan Turcotte.
Thank you. There we go. If we want fundamental changes, then we have to change things in the way we govern fundamentally. We need to make safe, secure, affordable housing a fundamental human right. The Green Party thinks that it is a human right. There is enough housing, there is enough money, there is enough in Canada that people should not be without housing. Small tax cuts aren't going to be enough if people make half of what it takes to afford to live in these places. But poverty is a systematic problem. It's not just one thing or another. It's a lot of things tied together. It's low wages. It's an uncertain job market. It's shortage of housing is the biggest one, but even social services like childcare. We're going through that now, looking for daycares. There are a bunch of things, but there are also several biases. There's my card. Race, gender, the effects of colonization. We need to look at all of these things, and we need to respect the rights of people.
David Haskell from the People's Party.
Thank you. Housing prices, like any other product, go up when supply is low and demand is high. But increasing supply is specifically a provincial jurisdiction. The province and municipalities have the power to say where a building can happen and how much. One of the only things that the federal government could do to get home prices lower is to reduce overall demand. And the research says that the most effective way of doing that in Canada would be to lower immigration levels. And this is something that the People's Party will do. Research from the Conference Board of Canada, Simon Fraser University, and most recently, a study out of UBC showed when immigration levels are too high, housing prices go up. The studies also show that it's mostly the economically vulnerable, for example, new immigrants already in Canada, who feel the greatest negative effects of this phenomenon.
Thank you. Now, Francisco Sorbera from the Liberal Party. Francisco.
Thank you, Don, and thank you to the volunteers at the St. Paul Society. Poverty, housing affordability, affordable housing, our record speaks for itself. 900,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty for the last 4 years. We brought in the first ever Poverty Reduction Act, which is now law. Poverty in Canada is declining and at near lowest levels in generations. We brought in the first ever National Housing Strategy committing $40 billion over 10 years, real investments after a period of time where we saw cuts to social programs in Canada and tax cuts for our wealthiest. We committed in our first ever National Housing Strategy to lift over 500,000 Canadian families from housing need and cut chronic homelessness by 50%, and we are ahead of schedule. We have work to do, but we are on the right path. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's discuss this for a moment. Both the Greens and the NDP have in their platforms some form of universal income. I didn't hear you specifically referring to it, either of you. So let me start with you, Garnet. Let me start with Dan. Is there a universal income that takes care of this problem of housing, and does it go over $57,000 a year? Because that sounds like a pretty high universal income. But apparently, based on what we've learned, if you don't make that in Toronto anyway, you don't get a house. You don't get an apartment.
It doesn't start there. And by the way, universal income was actually where I was going to go right before the red card got me. So thank you for giving us the opportunity. Universal income, and it's a livable wage. We need to determine what that livable wage is going to be. But as I said, this is more of poverty is a holistic, multifaceted issue. It has to do with jobs. It has to do with education. So we also believe in educational subsidies so that fewer people need to be in a situation where they can't afford to pull themselves out of this poverty. But yes, a universal basic income and guaranteeing housing as a human right. If you put those two things together, people will have a place to live, and it gives them a starting point.
And Matthew, does that fit in what the NDP is doing? Because you also talked about a $5,000 housing subsidy. Would that be part of an universal income?
The portable rent subsidy is something that would allow people today, effective tomorrow, to be able to keep up for the ever-increasing costs of rent. You'll know that in my city, particularly in my Hamilton, we have a situation right now where ODSP and Ontario Works and minimum wage have all stayed the same. And year after year, the rents go up in record numbers. So while we tout having record building permits and condos dotting the sky, the reality is that we also have record number of people living in tents. That I have actually visited around the world refugee camps that have more dignity than some of the people that are living in our own community. But we need to be very clear that this is not a conversation of immigration, that there are 8,000 people on our housing wait list today that have nothing to do with the people who are coming today or tomorrow. So we have to be very careful about that rhetoric that pit newcomers versus people who are already living in poverty in this country.
David, you shook your head.
Yeah, well, as I say, the people who suffer the most right now because of this affordability and housing crisis are newcomers. And if we truly do care about the people who are already in Canada, then we need to address it. And what my colleagues on this stage have been talking about, subsidies, more government spending, these are Band-Aid solutions. We actually have to look at the research that, again, has come out of UBC most recently that says the level of immigration we have right now is just too high. And we can't depend on the provinces to increase supply, so we have to decrease the demand. And this doesn't have anything to do with race or ethnicity.
When
it's
they
getting
come,
the numbers right.
don't they create a demand when they're here, and wouldn't that then lead to more houses being built?
Well,
apartments?
currently the research that, again, came out of Simon Fraser University shows that currently immigrants are about double the unemployment rate. And currently they are actually, it's a $5,000 cost per immigrant loss to our tax system.
Immigrants are not a loss to our
No,
society.
no, they aren't.
Immigrants
We all
help
know
build
immigrants who are
our
fantastic.
society, and in that frame, you create a very problematic, and I'd love to see your citations on that, because we know that the supply and the demand curves are not left up to the market, that the market is at the city level in particular through land use. We are seeing massive urbanizations that have nothing to do necessarily with immigration, but migration, because I'll tell you, most of the people who are moving into Hamilton Centre that are causing the gentrification are people who have already been priced out of Toronto, and that has to do with speculators, and certainly there are some foreign speculators, but they're not the immigrants that you're framing right now. These are people who are buying our real estate market up for the value and not the purpose of safe and dignified places for people to live.
Garnet.
You know, I think it's important to respond to some of the things that Francesco said in his opening, which, with respect, simply aren't true. The Conservative record is of lowering the GST, lowering the lowest marginal tax rate, and raising the base personal exemption. We brought in direct payments to parents as an alternative to a government-run childcare program, and as a result, poverty went down dramatically by 3% roughly during a recession. Now, Francesco has a talking point which says Conservatives want to, quote, raise taxes on the wealthy. So I would like to ask you, Francesco, I say that's not true. If you say Conservatives have raised taxes on the wealthy, then tell us which taxes, when, and by how much.
Well, you may be surprised to know it's Francesco's turn. Go ahead.
Thank you, Don, and great to see the debate, and hopefully for everyone here tonight, it's substantive debate and gives you answers and looks and insights. Frankly, Garnet, your universal tax cut that you guys have brought forward benefits the wealthiest in Canada. I'm an economist. Have a graduate degree. I worked on Bay Street and Wall Street. Yes, I'm into the PPC party candidate. My parents were immigrants to this country. They came here. They work hard. They sacrificed. They raised 3 boys. A family of 7 came through Pier 21 in the 1950s, and we worked, and we're proud Canadians, much like the immigrants are coming through here. I will stand up for immigrants all the time. I will follow Pope Francis's lead. I will respect and make sure this country is always inclusive, always compassionate, and always welcoming, because that is the Canada I know. That is the Canada I was raised in. Garnet, your tax cuts, your policies, sending checks to millionaires, which is a complete fact. Your tax cut today benefits the most wealthiest. Look at the numbers. Our raise in the basic personal exemption amount, which is proposed in our platform, takes away 700,000 people from the tax rolls. Our increasing old age security benefit, when people hit 75 by 10%, lifts 20,000 people out of poverty, 20,000 seniors. 900,000 people in Canada have been lifted out of poverty in the last 4 years. We've created 1.2 million new jobs, and that's the record I've covered. And you guys had anemic economic growth for 10 years, and that's the fact.
Okay, Francesco, the time is up. I want to ask you one question, though, if I may, David. When you say that the number of immigrants arriving is more than to satisfy the unemployment rate.
Right.
But the fact is that all the immigrants that are arriving are not coming here to work. In fact, most of them are families, and maybe only one, and so maybe it's like 25% of the immigrants arriving are actually going to take a job.
Currently, it's 26%. 26%
well,
of immigrants.
Okay, I'm out of percentage,
yeah.
But that's my point.
Yeah, yeah. But I
math wasn't my major. I couldn't help that.
Well, I'd like to respond to the mischaracterization of my party's policies. The first thing that I would mention is that one of the people who helped design our immigration policy is an immigrant from Calcutta and a practicing Muslim. And he said that what we need to do is make sure that we abandon political correctness and stick as close as we can to the facts. Because if we truly want to be compassionate, compassionate, and solve the problems that are in Canada, we have to be willing to talk about difficult issues. And again, this is not an issue related to race, ethnicity. It's about numbers. And right now, we are bringing into Canada, every 3 years, the population equal to Nova Scotia. And we just cannot have that for our affordable housing. It also is problematic.
I'm way over time, and I let everybody go long, which means that I'm now in trouble. But we're going to go on to the next topic. So.